Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, December 10th, 2024 edition of the SANS and Storm Center's Stormcast. My name is Johannes Ulrich and today I'm recording from Jacksonville, Florida. Jesse today looked at some intrusions into his SSH honeypot that, executed a lot of commands. Most of the time, after the attacker connects to the honeypot and is able to log in, they usually only execute about a dozen or so different commands trying to install, for example, additional backdoors or some kind of bot. These attacks were different. They had 1,000 and more commands that were being executed, and as it turns out, they were just repetitive curl commands. Now, these curl commands did not attempt to actually download anything. Actually, any output was just directed to def null. The apparent goal of these attacks was just to launch a denial of service attack. Jesse does see a lot of targets here in the crypto space, so that could possibly be some kind of extortion attempt or so against these crypto sites. From a defensive point of view, these attacks shouldn't be that terribly hard to defend against if you're behind something like Cloudflare or any kind of other anti-DDoS provider. They should be able to pretty easily filter these curl requests. They're not attempting to spoof any headers or any kind of user agent or such, so it should be pretty straightforward to filter them out. But of course, if they do have access to many thousand vulnerable systems, that could still just sort of volumetric overload the target system. And then for a change, we do have some vulnerabilities in an open source router operating system, OpenWRT. There are two vulnerabilities here. The first one is a command injection vulnerability that can actually be triggered by submitting packages to sysupgrade.openwrt.org. So this could potentially then lead to a compromise of the supply chain, which is also sort of the headline of these vulnerabilities. However, the OpenWRT folks did have some mitigations in place here. The code is executed in containers in order to isolate it from any other code. So in addition to this command injection vulnerability, the attacker would also have to find a container escape vulnerability. The second one is probably a little bit easier to exploit, and that's a SHA-256 collision. While SHA-256 is still considered a reasonable good hashing algorithm and collisions should be very difficult to come by, the problem here is that not the entire SHA-256 hash is used, but only the last 12 characters are being used, and that makes hash collisions quite a bit more likely. You essentially now only have 48 bits available that need to be brute forced. This hash is then being used in order to cache files, so an attacker could essentially trick the system here to overwrite a valid file with a malicious one and then cause it to be installed. These issues have, of course, been patched by now. There were issues in the OpenWRT infrastructure and were found and reported by Roydkak from Flat Security. And Google released its December update for Android. There are two critical vulnerabilities that are being addressed here, both cellular baseband vulnerabilities that could lead to arbitrary code execution if you have a vulnerable device. As usual, also lots of other high and medium vulnerabilities being addressed with this update, and definitely something that you want to apply as soon as it becomes available. In the past, I have mentioned as part of the podcast often RCS, most recently last week when I talked about the FBI and CISA recommending the use of encrypted messaging services. RCS is supposed to replace SMS at some point, and yes, Apple has supported it now as well after Google first was pushing it as a new standard. The problem is, and that's something here John Gruber with Daring Fireball pointed out, that its encryption capabilities are often oversold. Like many messaging standards, there are lots of options when it comes to RCS. And of course, they're trying to stay compatible with a wide range of messengers, including backwards compatible to good old SMS. And that leads to the problem that messages are not necessarily encrypted. Depends on what applications both the sender and the receiver are using, whether or not the message is encrypted. And it's not always that transparent to the user how a particular message is protected in transit. So keep that in mind with RCS. Probably still the easiest way to get sometimes an end-to-end encrypted connection, but certainly nothing that you should rely on if encryption is critically important to you. Well, and this is it for today. Did I miss a story that I should have covered? Well, send me a quick message. I'm always interested in hearing which stories you like or which stories I may have missed to adjust the content. And thanks, and talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.